In an exclusive interview, a Chinese whistleblower tells the story of how he helped Chinese officials source massive amounts of medical supplies from around the globe during the pandemic. Hong Kong police arrested two opposition lawmakers this Wednesday. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo criticized HSBC for reportedly shutting down accounts of pro-democracy Hong Kong media executives. And some local artists are turning to self-censorship for fear of violating the new law. A group of people in work uniforms are seen crawling in front of a business building. This is a form of punishment given to those who fail to achieve a satisfactory performance in their jobs. And the U.S. sanctioned 24 Chinese firms involved in helping Beijing advance its territorial claims in the South China Sea, and a Chinese chemist who they called one of the most significant drug traffickers in the world. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Hong Kong police are making new moves. This time they arrested two opposition lawmakers over anti-government protests last year. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
A Hong Kong opposition lawmaker found police at his door this Wednesday, wanting to arrest him on suspicion of rioting last year.
I participated in a riot? July 21st riot? Wow, Hong Kong is really absurd to this extent now.
Last July, about 100 men attacked pro-democracy protesters with steel rods at a train station in northwest Hong Kong. Lam, who was there, live-streamed the event, also reporting it to the police. Police arrived almost 40 minutes later. They didn't make any arrests. During the incident, Lam was attacked in the face by the mob and later hospitalized. Lam's Twitter account posted a notice from the Hong Kong police, which thanked Lam for reporting the crime. The tweet said, and now they're arresting him for rioting on that day.
Hong Kong police have now regressed to being a political tool. What happened on July 21st last year was outrageous, and you have framed a victim as an attacker. Don't you feel ashamed of this law enforcement operation?
Local authorities now say Lam's presence at the station in 2019 exacerbated the violent clash. The head of Hong Kong's Democratic Party called the arrest ridiculous.
For a legislator in the line of duty, mediating disputes is part of his job. The way authorities are handling Lam's case is turning black into white. In the July 21st incident, Lam Chuk Ting was injured. He was a plaintiff.
Lam was arrested along the 15 others, including another opposition lawmaker. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Some Hong Kong artists fear their work may violate Beijing's draconian national security law. As a result, they are censoring their own creations. But one artist says he won't stop his work.
The Hong Kong artist, who goes under the pen name Arto, has a history of tackling sensitive subjects. His drawings have explored topics censored across the border in mainland China, including the 1989 crackdown on protesters in Tiananmen Square. Fearing their creations may violate a new national security law imposed by Beijing, some Hong Kong artists say they're turning to self-censorship.
I'm pretty pessimistic on the creative front. A lot of art usually challenges the traditional ways or criticizes social values. What if artists accidentally cross that red line and the space keeps getting smaller?
The law, enacted in June, punishes subversion, secession, terrorism, or collusion with foreign forces with up to life in prison. Nearly 2,000 Hong Kong and international artists and cultural workers said in a statement, the security law created a climate of fear and self-censorship. Arto's cartoon column was recently axed from the Ming Pao newspaper. The paper said it wasn't because of the new law, but because they were revamping.
During this period of doom and gloom, it's hard not to think it's related to the national security law. Ending my series, I'm definitely not in a good mood. This is the scary thing about the national security law. It's white terror.
Despite anxiety over the law, Arto remains defiant.
You have to decide what your values are. You can possibly fear being arrested at any time, or regret that you've not done enough to make an impact on society.
For now, Atto says he will persist and continue to make his political art.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo criticized investment bank HSBC on Wednesday. He said in a statement the bank reportedly shut down accounts belonging to Hong Kong pro-democracy executives, but kept its relationships with officials facing American sanctions. The executives he mentioned are from Next Media, which publishes the city's famous pro-democracy tabloid Apple Daily. Pompeo said the bank reportedly cut off their access to both bank accounts and credit cards. He said it's an example of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's, coercive bullying tactics against the UK, adding free nations must ensure that corporate interests are not suborned by the CCP to aid its political repression. We stand ready to help the British government and its companies resist CCP bullying and stand for freedom. Headquartered in the UK, HSBC is facing mounting pressure from both sides of the Atlantic. Its market is deeply rooted in Hong Kong and China. And it's the bank which openly supports Beijing's draconian security law. But back home, British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab reprimanded the bank last month, saying Hong Kong's rights should not be sacrificed for bankers' bonuses. China's Ministry of National Defense issued a statement late Tuesday condemning the alleged invasion of an American U-2 spy plane entering its no-fly zone during live-fire military exercises. The statement said the action seriously interfered in normal exercise activities. The U.S. military, in a statement, said U.S. Pacific Air Force's personnel flew the plane and said that the flight was within accepted international rules and regulations. Also adding that personnel will continue to fly and operate anywhere international law allows. The U-2 spy planes are a high-altitude reconnaissance plane used during the Cold War over Soviet Union and other communist blocs. The planes can fly at over 70,000 feet and carry out military observations without having to enter a no-fly zone. China did not say exactly where the drills took place, but it's currently conducting drills in the Bohai Sea. Beijing has been increasing drills in the South China Sea, claiming the area as its own. But 5 other governments also have claims over the area. Beijing regards any naval exercises by the U.S. and its allies in the area as a threat. The Chinese regime claims its naval exercises are meant to safeguard national sovereignty. The Chinese Communist regime considers Taiwan as one of its own provinces. But Taiwan, as a democratic system, has never accepted that. The Chinese regime has threatened military force to bring the island under its control. In an interview over the weekend, Fox News' Steve Hilton asked President Trump what he would do if China invades or tries to control Taiwan. The president said, "China knows what I'm gonna do." Hilton brought up the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, noting its increased importance lately, particularly Taiwan's role as a world leader in semiconductors. The company, TSMC, recently cut ties with China's telecoms giant Huawei. President Trump said the topic of U.S.-China relations was a very big subject, a very powerful subject, but that the interview was an inappropriate place to talk about it. The president said the U.S.-China relation has cost the U.S. hundreds of billions of dollars. The FBI just released a report saying that each year the Chinese regime costs the U.S. $200 to $600 billion in stolen trade secrets, counterfeit goods, and pirated software. And U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper stated the Pentagon is prepared for China. His opinion piece for the Wall Street Journal delves into the growing military threat the Chinese regime's People's Liberation Army, or PLA, poses to the world. He compared the growing military of China to the Soviet armed forces in the 20th century, saying the world must study and prepare for the modernization of the PLA in the same way. Esper says the PLA has openly declared its intentions to complete military modernization by 2035 and become a world-class force by 2049. The U.S. National Defense has compiled steps to combat that threat. Firstly, maintaining a force that is able to compete, deter, and win across all domains: air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. Secondly, expanding and strengthening our network of allies and partners. Esper says it's vital as it provides an asymmetric advantage that our competitors cannot match. And thirdly, continuing to build the capacity of global partners. Esper said creating broader networks of capable, like-minded partners is core to our strategy to disrupt the Chinese Communist Party's malign influence. He ended by saying these initiatives reflect America's steadfast commitment to stand with our allies and partners against Beijing's bullying, support the sovereignty of all nations, and defend the free and open international system that has fostered decades of stability and prosperity for billions. In an exclusive interview, a Chinese whistleblower tells the story of how he helped Chinese officials sourcing massive amounts of medical supplies from around the globe, and how he realized he himself became part of the regime's bigger scheme to create a worldwide mask shortage for its own benefit. Today, we bring you part one of the story about how Jiang Pengyong discovered that some of the supplies were not sent to frontline medical workers, but hoarded by officials.
U.S. intelligence officials have accused China of hiding the CCP virus severity in order to hoard medical supplies. But did China intentionally hoard the supplies, or is the situation just a coincidence, since China's outbreak struck earlier than other countries? And the more important question is, did the masks China imported actually go into the hands of frontline medical workers and residents who most needed them? For Jiang Pengyong, a whistleblower who helped Chinese officials frantically purchase the world's masks in the first 2 months of the virus outbreak, the answer is clear.
I thought I was helping save the Chinese people. I never thought I would become an accomplice who helped the virus spread globally. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. So this incident has deeply hurt me and my value system. The medical supplies that I put so much effort into purchasing were sold by the Chinese authorities at a sky-high price for a profit.
9 years ago, Jiang Pengyong made headlines in China for exposing the country's corrupt Red Cross society, but as a result, he lost his career. Now, 9 years later, Jiang is again facing persecution from Chinese authorities for knowing too much about their secret operations, this time about how local governments in China profit from much-needed medical supplies meant for donation. The story began in early January this year. That's when Huang Zhongnan, an executive from a company in Hangzhou City, Zhejiang Province, reached out to Jiang. Huang said he was helping several government agencies and charities in southern China gather medical supplies in order to donate them to Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus outbreak. Huang asked Jiang, who lives in South Korea, to help purchase massive quantities of masks and send them to China. Huang even provided so-called red-headed documents, which are documents issued by the Chinese regime's agencies, complete with official stamps. Believing that he was helping the Chinese people, Jiang spared no effort and used his global business connections to find masks. In one case,
in India, we bought 20,000 Honeywell masks, 100,000 3M 9004 masks, 200,000 3M ING masks.
And from Korean manufacturers, he ordered over 3 million KF94 masks, a Korean-produced equivalent to N95 masks. But Jiang started to notice something was off. On January 31st, he was supposed to send 100,000 N95 masks to China through a free chartered plane. The plane was arranged by Korean and Chinese authorities and would fly from Seoul to China's Changsha City, a transfer center for supplies headed for Wuhan.
When we are about to load the supplies on the airplane, he all of a sudden told me that we were not going to use this charter plane. And why was that? He said the charter plane was meant for transporting donations only. He said they would pay to transport the supplies to Hangzhou.
Hangzhou is located in China's southern province of Zhejiang. At the time, the city has some virus cases, but the outbreak wasn't that severe. Hangzhou hospitals were still sending doctors to support Wuhan. It was around the same time Wuhan hospitals were posting SOS donation requests on social media. One doctor even pleaded on Weibo, writing, "We are not short of supplies, we simply don't have any." So why would Chinese authorities want the supplies sent to Hangzhou instead of Wuhan? Jiang explained that would be odd unless the supplies weren't actually meant for donation. The same reason they avoided the free chartered plane.
It would be really hard for them to get back or steal back the supplies once they were donated to Wuhan.
Jiang later realized after speaking with friends and acquaintances that he wasn't the only one who met with the odd situation. Many overseas Chinese people told him that their donations didn't actually reach the most infected areas as officials claimed they would.
As far as I know, people in Australia, Japan, the US, and Canada have been deceived. Some are international companies or producers like 3M, while some are patriotic Chinese international students or Chinese immigrants, even some governments who cared about the virus in China, and even charities. I believe I am not the only one who was deceived by Chinese authorities. There are other people whose medical supplies were taken this way. They were provided with official red-headed documents. But those who eventually received the supplies are not those who issued the documents.
That's when Jiang realized that the local agencies may have taken advantage of their power to use red-headed documents, as well as the kindness of Chinese immigrants, overseas governments, and charities. They bought the supplies at an extremely low cost and even for free, and instead of donating them.
So this whole thing is just operating under false pretenses. In the name of gathering donations, they hoarded medical supplies and then sold them at a much higher price in order to profit.
That's around the same time Wuhan's Red Cross came under fire in China for failing to distribute donations, and even refusing to offer the supplies when hospitals turned to the Red Cross warehouse for help. After reading online news articles, Jiang later discovered that the N95 masks he sold to local agencies for over 6 yuan each were resold to Chinese people for as much as 100 yuan each or more. When Huang realized Jiang had pieced together the secret, he threatened to make Jiang's entire family disappear if he dared to reveal the truth. Huang also stated that the Zhejiang provincial authorities and the Chinese Red Cross would back him up. But what Jiang didn't realize was that the Chinese agencies didn't just aim to sell the masks to Chinese people for profit, but to the entire world. Stay tuned for part 2 of this special report tomorrow, where we'll dive into the rest of the story and its global implications. Reporting by Xiaohua Gu and Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Sweden's public health agency says about 3,700 people were told in error that they had the coronavirus. They say it's due to a faulty Chinese testing kit from BGI Genomics. The agency said the kit could not distinguish between very low levels of the virus and a negative result. 2 of the Chinese company's subsidiaries are on the U.S. economic blacklist for human rights violations. U.S. authorities gave emergency use authorization for its testing kits in March, and the test kit has been widely exported to other countries. A group of people in work uniforms were videoed crawling in front of a business building. This is a typical punishment for those who fail to achieve a satisfactory performance in their jobs.
Outside the entrance of Silverstone Plaza, a group of employees were seen crawling on the ground in a line, still wearing their work uniforms. The plaza serves as the most important business circle in Chengdu, a city home to 16 million people in southeast China. One netizen explained the odd situation, saying sarcastically that staff who didn't achieve their work goals were rewarded with a crawling course. Another netizen expressed annoyance, claiming that no job is worth trading over your dignity. Some say the people pictured are merely poor people from the lowest social classes, being bullied by the upper classes. They say the higher classes are to blame, adding that the way the lower class lives indicates the bearings and wisdom of the upper class. They concluded that the only way to put things back on track is to terminate the Chinese Communist Party. One netizen also hinted that people should learn from those in Belarus, referencing the current protests. But this shame-inducing punishment isn't an isolated phenomenon. Last month, a company from the same city punished 7 employees by forcing them to eat Reaper's Hot Bars, a snack considered extremely spicy that few dare to try. The staff members were made to endure the punishment after they received unsatisfactory scorecards. After eating the bars, 2 employees were hospitalized for serious stomach aches and acute gastroenteritis, but the company didn't compensate them. Instead, one was fired for what the company called behaving inconsistent with company culture.
Now we turn to another video that's gone viral on Chinese social media. The clip shows a woman lying on the ground who appears to be unconscious. Directly above her, there's a hole through the bottom of a second-floor balcony. The injured woman was reportedly standing on the balcony before falling through the floor. What's even stranger, the building itself appears to be newly constructed. The incident took place in Pingyi County of China's eastern Shandong province. The U.S. imposed sanctions against 24 Chinese companies and their executives. It's a belated response to the ongoing construction and military action in the disputed islands of the South China Sea. The move also places export restrictions on these companies.
The United States has blacklisted 24 Chinese firms and executives involved in helping Beijing advance its territorial claims in the South China Sea. Daniel Wagner, CEO of Country Risk Solutions, says he's surprised it didn't happen sooner.
It really should come as no surprise to anyone that this type of action has occurred. Beijing has been illegally occupying the islands of the South China Sea for many years, and in spite of the Hague ruling in 2016, it continues to militarily occupy these islands.
Wagner says some would argue the US was a little negligent in allowing China to occupy the islands in the first place, and acting now might be a little too late.
It's important for the US to get involved because there is no other country that is willing to stand up to China from a military perspective. At this stage of the game, there really is no other country that would be prepared to do it, and the idea is that other allies of the United States would follow suit.
The State Department said it would impose visa restrictions on Chinese individuals responsible for or complicit in helping the Chinese military construct and militarize the islands. The sanctions restrict sales of US goods to be shipped to the blacklisted companies, along with some other items made abroad with US content or technology. Companies can apply for licenses to make the sales, but they must overcome a high bar for approval.
The Justice Department sanctioned a Chinese chemist who they called one of the most significant drug traffickers in the world. According to the department, Zhang Taotao sent fentanyl to the U.S. in disguised packages to slip past authorities. The department also sanctioned Ali Rice Technology Group, a company in Hong Kong. This company is said to have either been owned, controlled, or operated by Taotao. Under these sanctions, they're barred from trading with the U.S. in any way. Now we turn to San Francisco, where a paper document shredding truck was spotted next to the Chinese consulate there on Monday. That's after the same kind of truck appeared in front of the Chinese consulate in New York a mere 3 weeks ago. A truck with the words "shredded" on the side was seen parked at the back door of the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. 2 security vehicles were also parked nearby. 1 month ago, the U.S. government ordered the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas. That same evening, fire and smoke were seen in the consulate's backyard, indicating a final effort to destroy sensitive documents stored there. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo later called the Chinese consulate in Houston a hub of spying and intellectual property theft. Earlier this month, 2 trucks from a document destruction company were seen in front of the Chinese consulate in New York over 2 days. Over 10 trash containers, visibly filled with paper, were loaded onto the trucks. President Trump indicated last month that closing more Chinese consulates is possible. According to the Washington Times, the U.S. is preparing to order China to sharply reduce its number of diplomats in the U.S. The demand will reportedly even out the number of Chinese diplomats in the U.S. with the number of American diplomats stationed in China. Chinese consulates are shredding documents, though no one knows exactly what they're trying to destroy. But it's possible that some documents that Chinese citizens were forced to sign are among them. Chinese political refugee asylum holders in the U.S. will now face difficulty when applying for new passports after their old ones expire. That's because when the Chinese consulate identifies them as political asylum holders, it requires them to fill out a document of guarantee. The form asks the applicant if they've participated in activities related to their political asylum and if they're still doing so. It also questions what they think about their decision to apply for asylum. The appliers are then forced to say that their applying for political asylum was wrong and they have not suffered any persecution in China. They also have to guarantee they won't participate in activities related to political asylum. Lastly, they are made to state that they only applied for political asylum in the U.S. in order to obtain legal status. Human rights activist Yang Jianli, who now lives in the U.S., posted the forms he was made to fill out online when he applied for a passport renewal at the Chinese consulate. His documents show he was asked to admit he made a mistake when applying for political asylum, but he refused. Yang attended China's Tiananmen Square protests in 1989. Another man, Mr. Chen, told us that he and his relatives encountered similar situations. He reported being forced to sign the statement because he felt humiliated. He explained that his father was persecuted by the CCP during the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. He also described his suffering during the political upheaval. Later, his pregnant wife was even forced to get an abortion because of the country's one-child policy. He said that as a result of his experiences, he couldn't bring himself to say the persecution was fake. He called it an example of how the CCP extends its persecution of the Chinese people in the United States. One of his relatives answered the questions in alliance with the CCP in order to obtain a new passport. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.